Welcome back. This is the third and final part of our particle series on rain, and we have rain splashes, and in this one we're going to create this fog. Just this real nice moody fog that kind of drifts through the scene that kind of adds a little bit of mystery to the thing. And we can control, the lightness or how much is there, and we're going to show you how to do that here. But basically, I just wanted to show it to you in its full glory, and then you can go back and make decisions on what you want to do. It's a foggy day, and it's raining, and I've got splashes on the ground. Now, this is a separate standalone particle system, so we're going to keep that in mind. It's not really part of the rain because it's completely different, and it shares some elements of the other ones, but I'll go through and I'll set it up and show you how it's done. All right. So basically, let's look at the material first and show you what's going on with the material. There is a texture that you can download. I believe it was called, where did I put that? Fog. It was an image that was created in Photoshop. It's basically just I rendered clouds in Photoshop, and I didn't really play with the filters much other than I applied it a few times to try to get a decent amount of light in dark areas. And what's going to happen is the dark areas are going to go invisible and the white areas are going to remain as fog. So that's kind of why we have that set up down there like that. Now the material itself, just so you know what's going on, the base color is a combination of that fog image and something called a radial gradient exponential. Now what I want, and I'll show it to you here in the multiply, you notice how this is a square image, but that is a round ball. Okay, that's what this radial gradient exponential is used for. I could go into Photoshop and I could say, look, I just really need an image that looks kind of like this, so I'll go in and do the render cloud effects, and then I'd have to create a circle, and then I would have to feather it and delete the outer areas and make it go black. And it's kind of tricky to do. I've had to do it in the past, and then I realized that this is in here, why not use it? So that's kind of what it's doing. It takes whatever image that you've got and just looks at it like through what we call a vignette, or a little round, shaded round ball. And I do have control over that. I can change the center position, I can change the radius, I can change the density, I can invert it if I want to do it that way. I can see the outside and not the inside. There's a lot of things I can do with this, and it's a great way when you just need like a puff of smoke, or you just need a bit of fog, and you don't want to have to go in and paint this really complicated object that has opacity and all kinds of things going on in here. Just let this do it here. It does all the work for me, and I don't have to mess with it. Up here, attached to the UVs, I have what is called a rotator, and a rotator is doing just exactly what it says it's doing. It's rotating the image. And if you look over here, you can see the clouds are moving, and I can control the movement on the X, the movement on the Y, and I also can control the speed. And what I want is just fog that just looks like it's wafting. It's just like whoever walks by is just the act of them walking by is going to pull the fog along with them. That's the look that I was going for. But you can use this rotator to do a lot of different things. We use it when we're doing oceans and stuff like that. So there's two things. One's called a panner. A panner is just simply side-to-side movement, and a rotator is side-to-side movement and speed. So I have a little bit of more control over this with a rotator. Okay. Then down here, I've got emissive color. This is again, a translucent texture. So we want to make sure that it's set to be translucent, and this is all spelled out in Canvas in the handout for this. I do have an emissive color on there to set it to 0.25. What it does is that makes it glow just a little bit. I kind of want that whiteness to the fog. I don't want to have it be a darker color. And what would happen is if I were to remove that and go back and look at my scene, this would all be a dark gray. And it looks kind of odd. It looks like, why is there a dark gray in the world? There should be, fog should look misty and should look kind of shiny like that. And that's what that does, is it just brightens it up just a little bit. And then down here, I have depth fade. And this is set to opacity. What depth fade allows me to do, you can see I've got a constant set at 200 in here for the fade distance. If more than 200 units off into the away from the camera, this fog effect disappears. So wherever I go, what happens, I can put fog in the entire world, the entire universe. I'm only going to see it within 200 units of wherever I am. And that prevents the engine from having to display all of it. It's an invisible particle at that point. I don't see any particles or anything out there beyond 200 units away from me, which is about fine. And then I've got it set to a opacity of about 0.25. So I'm looking, if this is set to 1, I'm seeing that solid image. If I set it to 0, the image goes invisible. If I set it to 0.5, this gets a little bit too bright. It's too much, it's obvious. So I've got it set at 0.25 for this nice transparent look. You can see through the clouds there and see clouds behind it. And you get a little bit of that additive action. If you don't remember what additive is, the way it works is I've got cloud here, and I've got cloud, would have cloud say back over there. Well, wherever you look through one to the other, you get kind of an additional brightness. It's because it takes this value of, say, 0.25 and takes the value back there of 0.25 and makes it 0.5, which makes it a little bit more solid and glow just a little bit more. So you get this nice wispy, cloudy feel, which is really kind of cool. And it's completely random. So it's really kind of a nice thing. Then what I've done is I set up a particle fog. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another one here just so I can kind of show you how it does. Hopefully it'll work. Sometimes particles, they can be weird. Just so you know, when you're creating particle systems, there are going to be times when you do something and you swear you have it all set up, and then you go back to it a second time, and for some reason it's not working. But I think what you'll find is that you kind of get used to that, and you get prepared for it, and you can go back and make changes to it so it reappears again. Okay, there's my basic fog window, or my particle window. I don't have anything in here yet. Now, this one is going to be called fog, so I'm going to go ahead and right-click and change my emitter name to be fog, just so I know what it is. This is also going to be my GPU sprites. So I'm going to go to type data, down to GPU sprites. Now, again, you're going to get a warning. The particle system has no fixed bounding box. All you have to do is go to the triangle next to bounds and select set fixed bounds, and that problem goes away. Pull those things in. All right, under required, I have my fog material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and make sure that my fog material is selected here. And I do have a couple of them, so I want to make sure I get the right one. There's my mfog. Excuse me. Come back over here, and then required, we'll select mfog. So I get that little thing going on right there. So it starts to look a little bit like smoke. Now the other thing we're going to do in here is we're going to change the screen alignment here. We're going to go ahead and set facing camera position. And we're going to, because I've got an element in here that makes those particles, the texture disappears when you get further away, what we're going to do is we're going to change the sort mode down here so it goes to distance to view. Not going to see any difference in here other than every time you do something, this respawns. That's why it does what it does. It's just respawning. But you're really not going to see anything here because it has to be something, this is affecting things that are in the distance, particles that are away from you, so you're not going to really see any difference in through here. We're going to leave the other stuff down here to be the same, except we are going to change this emitter loop to 1. Now, why am I changing it to 1? Don't I want this thing to run forever? And the answer is yes. It's going to run forever because I'm going to do that. Basically, I want to create one instance of the fog particles, and then I want them to stay on the screen. So they're really going to have a different life cycle as opposed to what we've done with already. Your life cycle is going to be different settings. The sizes are going to be different settings. Initial location is going to be different. A lot of things are going to be different. But basically, the emitter loop here says fire off one burst of particles. So as soon as my level starts, boom, particles are going to appear, and they're going to appear throughout my world, and it's going to look like I want it to look. And they're not going to die off. They're going to stay right where they are. Right, now my spawning, what I'm going to do on this one is the spawn, this is going to depend upon the size of your environment, because you need to fill your environment with fog. Now, I am going to go in and make the initial sizes of these things fairly large. So I can get away with having less of them. And what I'm going to do is in here, I'm just going to set this to 100. I think 100 of these little individual clouds will kind of get me what I want to do. And that's the only change I'm going to make in through here. Lifetime. This is where we're going to make the change. Right now, those are appearing and they're living for 1 unit. I'm going to set this to 0 and 0. And they're not going to die out. Now they're moving, but you notice they're gone. It did it once, and then it didn't respawn. Those are done. Those are gone. And that's kind of what I want out of this. When we do our initial size and our initial velocity, you'll see that they're going to come back and we'll be okay there. So the initial size itself, we're going to set that to be really, really big. So we're going to leave everything the same in terms of it's a vector uniform, but we're going to make the sizes across the board here be 1,000 units. Okay. Now all of a sudden you can see we got some fog there. So I got this big swirling ball of fog. I've got 100 of them here. They're all doing exactly the same thing. They're still moving a little bit, so we'll take care of that. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to the initial velocity, we're going to remove that. And now they're just going to stay in place. And color over life, we're going to delete that too because we don't really need that one. So now you can see I just get this one big ball right here. So what we're going to do is I would like to have these things. I need to determine how big the area is going to be where these are going to appear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I have, when I add in location, I talked in the last couple of videos about I can either set an initial location, which would give me a bounding box. I can type in the size of the bounding box, like 2200 by 2200 in one direction and minus 2200 by minus 2200 in the other direction, and I get a box that's roughly 4400 square, and I can set height and depth, so I can do it that way. I can also use shapes, and I can emit from shapes, and we're going to do this when we get into the fire, because we're going to have particles, or fire particles are going to be emitted around a cylinder. Or when we have smoke, we want the smoke to look like it's coming, in essence, out of a cylinder. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an outer ring, and we're going to have all of the fog appear within that outer ring. So what I'm going to select is location, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to get cylinder. Now the cylinder, not too much is happening right there. And the reason that too much isn't happening is because I don't really have any settings in it right now. If I look at it, my start radius and my starting height, these are the radius of the cylinder. Think of that as a cylinder with like a little trash can here, and this is being spawned inside that trash can. Now this is 1,000 units big, so that little trash can right now is 50 units. So think of, there's this little teeny tiny can inside of there, and that's being spawned inside of it. What I would like it to do, and so they're all being spawned literally in the same spot, but I would like to have them scattered throughout a much larger environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, let's make this constant 3,000 units. And now you see the fog is spread out over a much larger area. They got patchy fog spread out over this big round cylinder shape. And if I go down inside of it, it's like I feel like I'm moving through clouds. I'm flying through clouds. And that's something else that you can think of maybe someday when you're doing something you would like to have that little effect going on as well. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the starting height 50 on that. That's probably pretty good. If you make changes to it, what you'll see is not much of a change, because it's that unit is each of those individual puffs is 1,000 units. So anything I have over here that's less than 1,000 is not really making any difference. If I said make that 2,000, then I've got an area that's twice the height of the particle, and so they are scattered literally like clouds, where I have a height of 2,000, and if this is only 1,000, I've got room up and down to move those things. So I'm just going to take that back to 50, which is where it was, and it's going to force them all to remain in that general vicinity. And there they all are. Okay. Then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and add an initial location seed. Now, this looks like it's going to be repeating what I have already done. If I've got these things in a cylinder, why am I going to go back in and add now another location and then add in an initial location? The reason I am doing this is because I want them to be spawned in the same area every time and to remain in the same area. I'm going to be using pretty much the same settings that I used when I did the other one, 2200 by 2200, except what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to set the height at 50, and then I'm going to go to minus 2200 and minus 2200, and in this case we'll go minus 25. And so I'm just basically controlling all of these things, and they're all right there in that zone, and that kind of looks pretty good. Now you might wonder what's going on when you do that. Okay, that has to do with the way that the world, it's looking at the world. All right. So if I've got facing camera position, they're all looking at me. There is a problem that we have with particles, and you'll see this when we start to figure out, you know, how if I walk into a building, how do I stop the rain from going through a building? Well, you have a problem with particles, and the problem with particles is they go through everything. So then you have to have a volume that goes in and kills the particles, but they're not 100% foolproof. Occasionally you'll get a raindrop coming through because it isn't foolproof, and we have to do something completely different. But that sometimes when you look at a certain angle at a particle system, it goes away, and that's really where these things come in. In fact, if I go back and change that to square, you'll notice yes, it rebuilds itself, but now if I look right or left, they vanish. And if I go back and say, let's do this, I can look right, I can go further that way before it vanishes, and I can go back the other way. What you'll see is that's an extreme motion in through here like that. And if I look down, they're gone, and if I look up, they're gone. That's a function of these things, and it's going to be okay once we get in the world to see this. But just so you know, don't panic if you turn right and they're gone. It's like, what the hell happened to them? That's not going to happen to you when you go in the level. All right, so at that point, I'm going to save that up, close it down. And that's the effect we're going to get when you put it in your world. All right, which is a pretty nice little, it's a nice little touch that adds that a nice moodiness to it. So if you needed to have something that looked moody and treacherous, there you've got it. If you're moving through the scene, the clouds, if the fog seems to sweep away from you, which is really what happens. Now that's being handled by the fact that I've got the depth set, so when I get within a certain distance of it, it goes away. But what that's actually doing is it's actually replicating the way fog behaves. If you were walking through fog, the air that's pulled along with you, the movement of your body through space would make fog kind of peel away from you like this, and so you get this really nice effect of you're moving through the environment and the fog is kind of moving away from you. And you can look up and you can look down and it doesn't go anywhere, and you're all set. So that's fog. It's placed in here separately, so I have different controls over it. Don't panic if you look at it like this and go, well, where is it? I'm not seeing it. This is another thing about particles. They kind of come and go. If you put it in your scene and you're looking at it and it's like, where are those fog particles? Why am I not seeing them? That's my rain. This one here should be the fog. Why are they not showing up? If it really bothers you, then delete it and then put it back in. Or just try to play it and see if it's not actually there anyway. Because a lot of times it's really there. It's just your computer's having a hard time displaying all those particles on the screen. Now remember also that you have some changes in there. If you would like to have more fog, you can increase the number of particles. If you would like less fog, you can decrease them. You can always go back into the material and make them more transparent or make them more opaque. You have a variety of things that you can do to that. to kind of make it work the way you want. If you want the fog to move a little bit faster, you can go back into the material and set the rotator speed to do that. So that's fog. Next thing we're going to show you how to do in here is I'm going to do a separate video on setting up the Sky Dome, because it involves working with a texture, and I want to make sure that you know how to do that. And then I'm going to show you how to do the smoke and fire and embers scene.